Today in Master of Crafts, the medical art of recovery after severe spinal injuries, a neurosurgeon that became an engineering expert for his patients. What is neurological rehabilitation and why might it become more important than successful surgeries? UATV sets off to a unique rehabilitation center where professional medical specialists help wounded people who are bound to a hospital bed get up and start walking again. Severe spinal trauma is always a challenge for modern medicine. It is not yet possible to sew torn nerves back together, so scientists from all over the world are searching for alternative ways to restore the sensitivity and mobility of patients. Meet Nathan Copeland, a victim of a car accident. His thoracic spine was severely damaged, which left him almost completely paralyzed. Nathan retained some mobility in his shoulders, but his hands don't feel the sense of touch. The young man didn't give up and signed up for experimental treatment at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. The scientists had already had a prototype of an artificial arm, but making it as sensitive as a real one seemed to be highly impossible. After almost 10 years of improvement and several cerebral operations, Nathan turned into a cyborg. Electrode arrays were implanted into his brain, which today allow him to not just move the prosthetic arm better than his own, but also feel touches as if the limb is alive. Now he can accurately feel which fingers are being touched, and he's able to manipulate objects quite deftly. Unfortunately, medicine cannot do anything with Nathan's arms, at least for now. However, both doctors and scientists know that they wouldn't have made such a breakthrough without the unbending will of their patient. Nathan wanted to move and feel sensations again so much that he mastered the artificial arm, even despite some of the shortcomings of the imperfect bionic technology. Ukraine cannot yet boast of such innovations, but it has a neurosurgeon who has achieved more than many of his Western colleagues, albeit in a different way.
Ми виключно займаємося пацієнтами, які мають проблеми, ураження.
We work exclusively with patients who have a damaged central and peripheral nervous system of a various genesis.
Сам наш, скажімо, такий, можливо сказати, досвід
Over time, our experience has made us focus mainly on patients with traumatic brain injuries and spinal trauma.
Спінальною травмою.
Among his patients, neurosurgeon Alexander Kulik also has children injured in traffic accidents and wounded Ukrainian military servicemen. Veterans of the war in the east of the country are treated here free of charge at the expense of charities. One of many such patients forced Alexander to go beyond the scope of routine rehabilitation. We drew the conclusion that we must use the experience of Ukrainian specialists and an exoskeleton system here in Ukraine, which would help patients get accustomed to activity of a new level at this stage. Why are just successful surgeries not enough to heal the wounded? What is the essence of Alexander Kulik's neuro-rehabilitation method? Find out next in our program how the neurosurgeon started making exoskeletons and special bicycles for the rehabilitation of such patients. Therapy with stem cells, the predecessors of neurons, is considered the frontier in the treatment of spinal injuries. Simply put, biological building material, which can restore at least some of the lost mobility, is injected into the patient's spine. The safety of this approach was proven by American neurosurgeons from the University of California in a study published in December of 2018. Although its effectiveness leaves much to be desired, patients with torn spinal cords could not get up or even feel their limbs. Nevertheless, special tests showed that 3 of the 4 paralyzed gained the ability to consciously activate muscles, and they have generally advanced by 1 or 2 points on the scale of spinal cord injuries. That is essentially the same achievement as making several dozen steps on the way up to the peak of Mount Everest. However, recovering from such injuries is always a very long and tedious process. The Neurosurgery Institute has established a neuro-rehabilitation and restorative treatment clinic, which continues treatment of patients after complex neurosurgical interventions. The Neurosurgery Institute did it first in the 1960s. It showed that such patients can be quickly rehabilitated if neuro-rehabilitation methods are applied to them. Through 15 years of experience, Alexander Kulik has learned that even a successful surgery with the use of advanced technologies like stem cell transplantation is incapable of leading a patient to recovery on its own. Therefore, me and his colleagues from a modern rehabilitation clinic adopted half-century-old developments and improved them using modern technology.
члени команди вийшли з інституту.
Our team members are from the Neurosurgery Institute, where we studied and worked. We understood almost all the fundamental ideas and directions there. In essence, we didn't create anything new. We just took the existing unused data from the archive and libraries. This is thanks to our great teachers.
Просто підняли, це наші вчителі.
The whole point of neuro-rehabilitation is to catch the patient right after the surgery, not to let them give up and accept their state. Alexander Kulik claims that every person with a spinal cord injury, if it's not completely torn, has a small window of time and opportunity, while individual therapy can lay the foundation for recovery in months or years, despite negative predictions. Neither a scalpel nor pills will lead to recovery. Only actions and techniques that are based in a different direction.
Коли пацієнт лежить в ліжку і
Patients are lying in a bed and they are capable of some movement, some activity.
якоїсь активізації, його
Their recovery processes require activation. Alexander Kulik emphasizes that he does not give overly optimistic predictions to his patients and does not promise miraculous recoveries. His methods lie in exhaustive daily work, when even several steps toward the summit of Mount Everest are considered a good result. But if the patient's functions are not completely restored, the neurosurgeon offers his own engineering developments to compensate for what was lost. Exclusively for UATV, Alexander Kulik reveals the stories of rehabilitation of two Ukrainian fighters who were on the verge of lifelong immobility, but could take part in a bike race in the end. Sounds rather incredible, doesn't it? How it's made. Severe spinal injuries are not uncommon in the war, including in the conflict between the Ukrainian military and the Russian-supported militants in the east of the country. However, such patients account for only a few percent of the wounded, since a sniper bullet is more likely to kill a person rather than just damage their spinal cord. In addition, it's a difficult task to any army in the world to provide qualified aid directly on the front line and bring the wounded to a hospital alive. Serhiy was a first lieutenant in the 92nd Brigade and served in the Luhansk Oblast in the summer of 2015. A shot of an enemy sniper miraculously missed his heart, but it damaged the thoracic spine severely. Serhiy underwent a successful surgery, but he was given a disappointing forecast. It also hit the lungs and the kidneys. In short, there were many complications. Each doctor in every hospital said that basically I would no longer be able to walk. After the wound, I somehow ended up in this institution and I have undergone treatment here for almost 2 years to recover. Serhiy wasn't paralyzed completely, but the hospital where his surgery was done had neither the equipment nor the methods of recovery. Alexander Kulik recalls the condition of the patient 2 years ago.
в нього свідомість ясна, руки працюють, але він
His mind was clear, his arms worked, but he was practically immobilized since he was completely bedridden. By the time his wounds healed and the stitches were removed, the question arose of what the patient was supposed to do next.
І от тут починається якраз саме
That's when the interesting period began, which we call the period of restorative treatment.
лікування.
The muscles of a patient that is confined to a bed degrade quickly, not to mention the occurrence of bed sores and other unpleasant symptoms. Moreover, a patient that spends a long time in a hospital bed stops believing that they would ever get up again. In the end, even if their spinal cord is partially restored, there will be no progress due to the physical and psychological state. Knowing that, Alexander Kulik tries to keep his patients in a lying position as little as possible. For initial recovery, the neurosurgeon uses his combined methodology in conjunction with the best equipment in the world, which the clinic purchases with contributions of social sponsors. The main task at this stage is to lay the foundation for future success.
Ми пацієнта обстежили.
We examined the patient and found a certain window of hope in his physical capabilities, the use of which will minimize his neurological deficiency. We also offered him to compensate those functions that we cannot restore for objective reasons, although that compensation would be possible not immediately, but only when he acquires certain abilities. In short, Alexander broke down a major problem into several small ones, and Serhiy started moving methodically from one intermediate goal to another. That doesn't mean exercising 20 minutes a day like in physical education. Patients of the Neuro-rehab clinic work out for 8 to 9 hours daily. It is basically a full-time job where their body is the main project. Verticalization is one of the main components of this process. The patients are conditioned to remain in a standing position, supporting them in various ways, so that their heart and other bodily organs get used to working in a normal mode instead of a recumbent mode. Serhiy got the hang of it fairly quickly, thus disproving the forecasts of his first doctors. A chasm of purely psychological limitations, which were the consequences of his wound, prevented him from walking on his own. Usually, orthoses, external devices that support limbs, are used to help such patients. But Alexander Kulik quickly realized that buying a basic orthosis won't do it for Serhiy with his peculiarities. At the same time, a more perfect device from abroad that cost tens of thousands of dollars was simply too expensive for them. However, the neurosurgeon knew exactly what kind of exoskeleton his patient needed, so he decided to search for a solution, and he found it. We made such an exoskeleton. It's a complex system that combines certain titanium alloys, ultralight titanium alloys, which have the strength of steel, but the lightness of aluminum, and are also wear resistant. These are certain polymers for parts that repeat the shape of the body. It also incorporates hinged mechanical devices. The neurosurgeon assembled this exoskeletal system in his home workshop after studying the technology in public domain and consulting specialists. Here he adjusts and cleans Serhiy's foot orthosis. If a tiny particle gets in here and the patient can't feel the leg, it will create pressure, which will result in a sore. Foreign bodies in orthosis are the bane of patients. Therefore, we often use them regularly, just like they do it abroad. Alexander Kulik's invention gave the fruits of his labor. 2.5 years after a severe wound, Serhiy is today capable of not only standing, but also walking. The orthosis helped me to walk again. Little by little, I restored my movement. That is, we compensated the things that we promised to compensate for him 2 years ago, thanks to the exoskeleton. And Serhiy walked. Another patient of Alexander Kulik named Alexander incurred an even more severe injury. His cervical spine was damaged in the war. Only my arms worked a little bit. I could only raise and lower them. My fingers didn't work. Only one triceps, one biceps, and a part of the forearm. I couldn't turn around in the bed or eat on my own without a nurse's assistance. His rehabilitation path was more difficult than that of Serhiy. Alexander recalls falling into despair more than once, thinking that he couldn't even get the hang of his arms properly, not to mention getting up. But daily rehab exercises from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. didn't let him relax. 2 years later, he could drink from a cup, although he still cannot control his fingers. I understand that it's hard for him and that he is tired. I know that he loses patience sometimes, but he understands that complete recovery is ahead, his ability to walk is on the horizon, and that a full-fledged normal life is also ahead, so we must continue working. For 2 years, the patient has been exercising daily for 6 to 8 hours. After the initial recovery, the neurosurgeon came up with an idea of how to raise the spirits of both Serhiy and Alexander. Many of his colleagues considered it impossible, but Alexander stood his ground. Aware of the personal characteristics of patients and knowing their weaknesses, we set a goal to make such technical means that would allow patients to feel on par with healthy people. But where can there be on par with healthy people? Definitely not on a running track. And then it hit us that cycling is the best solution. The idea was to organize some cycling event, where our patients who have been exercising for 2 years can show the results of their treatment and physical recovery. The neurosurgeon looked up several constructive solutions on the internet, took 2 conventional bicycles, and with a welding machine in his hands, converted them for the needs of Serhiy and Alexander. In such a way, the traction could be created with levers. Alexander recalls that thanks to the help of other doctors from the clinic, it only took 1 night to finish the job. They chose a racetrack like they would for ordinary cyclers that is 4 kilometers long on cross-country terrain. Everyone wanted us to make it shorter, saying that they couldn't make it that far. One is a completely paralyzed fighter with a severe cervical spine injury, and the other one, with a thoracic spine injury, are riding bicycles for the first time along the same route as ordinary people on conventional bikes. It was our celebration of the strength of mind, the triumph of will, and the firm belief that these patients would one day get up and walk again. The race inspired Alexander not to give up even more and to continue pursuing the main goal, even if it takes years. To walk, of course. I think it's possible. I just have to work really hard for that. See, I can crumple this cup, even though my fingers don't work completely. Today, Alexander Kulik is working on a prototype of a bionic exoskeleton that can read electrical signals from the surface of active muscles without the use of implants, thus being controlled by the patient's mind. The Ukrainian neurosurgeon hopes to make his contribution to the progress of world medicine, which, with every passing year, gives paralyzed people more and more opportunities to feel like travelers at the foot of a tall mountain instead of being hopelessly bedridden.